So when we were looking at what's needed to keep a positive mindset in our 50s, we talked about three circles within a Venn diagram. The first was about our adaptability to change. The second was our attitude to mortality. And the third was around our sense of purpose and sense of meaning. So if we were to look at that second circle, our attitude to mortality, why is that important in our 50s? Well, mortality comes a little bit more to the front during our 50s because we're anywhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of the way through our lives. So not unnaturally, we kind of tend to think about how much we've got left. And if we're thinking about how much time we've got left, then inevitably we will occasionally or perhaps frequently think about our own death and our own mortality. It may be being underlined for us by bereavements that are happening with more frequency, whether that's friends and family or whether that's celebrities and other people who we have seen throughout our lives or possibly even grew up with through TV or radio or however else we got to know them. So, death, let's call it death, is an increasing part of our lives, ironically, throughout our 50s. So, we've got some choices here. We've got some choices to completely ignore that fact. We've got some choices to embrace it and to use it for a sense of urgency or a sense of preparation or a sense of getting something done in the time that we have left. We also have the opportunity to reflect on it and maybe figure out how we feel, because maybe we don't think we have time to think about this stuff because we're too busy living in the present and making the most of now, or having to deal with what's in the present and what's in the now for us. But nevertheless, it's an important aspect of getting to grips with a positive mindset. And we know from lots of research that there are different ways of thinking about mortality and different aspects to it. It's not simply that we are going to die, although that's a pretty solid existential fact. But there are complexities and nuances to how we think about mortality. So for example, there's a legacy part to this. What do I want my legacy to be? If I'm to think of myself on my deathbed or at my own funeral, what would I like to leave behind? What would be my legacy? What would I like that to be? What would I like my values to have been? What would I like people to have known about me and to say about me? What would I like to be the record of my life? So there's a legacy thinking part to our attitude to mortality that can start to make us think and perhaps shift in terms of our mindset about how we see this. There is, of course, a fearful part of thinking about mortality. Maybe this is something that you are scared of. Maybe this is something that you are nervous about. Maybe you feel powerless in the face of death, and it's just something that you don't want to think about. Maybe it's something that you'd rather avoid and don't want to think about it at all. There is, I will put this in the links for this video, but there is an intriguing idea that I came across, which I'd never even knew existed, called a death cafe. And a death cafe is a place where people come together, drink tea, probably have cake occasionally as well, and simply talk about death. And they talk about it in a way that is intended to normalize it and to take that fear out of it, and to make it something that we perhaps can feel more at ease about as a result of talking about it openly, honestly, and without attachment. So death cafes, I think, are an intriguing idea, and I will put a link in the information for this video about that. But the point is that fear and fearfulness of death is one other aspect of thinking about mortality. On the flip side to that, of course, there's the idea of acceptance and being accepting of our own mortality. The idea that, of course, we can't live forever, despite what Oasis says about it, and that all of us will die at some point. And within that acceptance, there's also an idea that I'm not going to let this ruin my life. I'm not going to let this idea dictate how I feel about death. And actually, I'm going to feel empowered as a result of accepting my own mortality. Yes, it may make me a little bit more urgent, and it may make me take some action where I didn't take action before or wasn't intending to take action, but I'm accepting of death as something inevitable. So acceptance, of death sits almost as the polar opposite to fear in some ways. Another way of looking at our own mortality is a feeling of being disempowered. We like to be in control. It's natural for us as human beings. But if we have a disempowered attitude towards mortality, then maybe we feel a bit hopeless. Maybe we feel that life is futile and life is pointless. So again, it's a different lens. It's a different way of looking at our own mortality. This idea of our mortality being something that's disempowering for us. We may also, be disengaged with the idea of mortality. We may be the kind of person that just thinks about the present. We're very, very focused on the present, and the idea of death doesn't really come to us very often. It's not something that we give much thought to, and perhaps on those occasions, we may simply say that we've forgotten the idea that we're going to die. It's just not registering with me. It's just not registering in my day-to-day life, and in any case, perhaps that would be a waste of energy. What would be the point? So being disengaged from thinking about our own mortality is another way of looking at it. So it's not always that straightforward, and we will all have very, very different views about this. And for some of us, thinking about it is disempowering. It makes us ineffective, and we bury our heads in the sand, and we don't want to think about it. For others of us, it's an inspiring and an energizing thing to think in those terms, to think of your own mortality, because as someone wrote to me in an email, something along the lines of, he was thinking about the 10,000 days or so that he's got left, and wanting to make the most of them. So we can start to quantify this sometimes in terms of years or days, and thinking about, well, do you know what, if this was 20 years ago, I would not be feeling the same as I am now, because I've got this sense of my own mortality, and a sense of urgency, and a sense of the need to do something. And whether that's driven by the idea of legacy, this is what I want to leave, whether that's driven by an idea of fear or disempowerment. What's important here isn't necessarily that any of these things are right or wrong. They are just different ways of thinking about our mortality. And one of these ways of looking at it may be more dominant for you at this moment in time. How would you like to think about it? How would you like to shift or change your attitude towards mortality, if at all? Maybe you don't. Maybe it's something you're completely comfortable with. But taking some time and taking some opportunities to reflect on this can be really helpful, because there are, again, plenty of resources out there that will help you to do that. And I will, again, put in the information section some suggestions I'm making about, particularly around questions to ask yourself. No right or wrong in any of this. They're simply questions to help you think through what might be your attitude to mortality, and what is it about that that you think is empowering, and what is it about that that gives you a positive mindset? Because the thread and the theme of all of my 50s is what is going to give you a positive mindset, what is going to help you in this particular aspect of mortality, what is going to help you to develop your own positive mindset. So hopefully you'll get some more reflections, some more thoughts from the resources below. I'd be really, really happy to hear what you think about it, and to drop me a line as usual, or indeed to have a conversation if this has sparked anything in particular in your mind. But that's certainly phase number 2, our attitude to mortality. And as we go on with some of these videos, we'll be unpacking those ideas and looking into them a little bit further. But hopefully that's a useful and interesting overview for you in the first place. And thanks for watching.